Hey there, sleepy travel at night. We're slipping past the mead halls and thunderous sagas to a quieter, colder place where the longships creak like lullabies and the sea itself whispers secrets no skald dared sing. Forget the horned helmets Hollywood sold you. The real Vikings kept something far sharper tucked beneath their cloaks, and it wasn't always steel. Before you settle into your pillow, tap like only if these bedtime detours truly ease your mind. And drop a gentle comment telling me where you're listening from and what hour the moon hangs outside your window. I love picturing the quiet constellation of us drifting off together. Now dim the lights, maybe set a soft fan humming, and let's glide across the dark water. Just breathe in the salt and pine, breathe out the day's worries, and listen as the oars dip in perfect rhythm. We're not here for battle cries tonight. We're here for the hush between raids, the unsettling lull where secrets settle like frost on wool. Ready, let the tide carry us. Picture yourself on the edge of a dream. The year is 865. The sky is still a bruised violet, and the North Sea lies flat as beaten pewter. You are a crofter's child, maybe 10 summers, maybe 12. Nobody bothered counting in a hamlet huddled along the mud-brown estuary of a river whose name will not survive the century. You have spent the night on a straw pallet, sharing warmth with a goat and 2 younger siblings. The goat smells of milk and tallow smoke. Your siblings smell of salt from last night's tears. Outside, the tide is turning, but the sound it makes is gentle, more sigh than snarl. The air is thick with January cold, cold that tastes of iron and seaweed. You do not know it yet, but your world is only 6 heartbeats away from ending. Listen, over the lap of water comes another sound, the faint, rhythmic creak of wood bending under weight. You think it might be the wind in the fish-drying racks, or perhaps the old elm that leans over the churchyard palisade. You pull the threadbare blanket to your chin, though the blanket is more holes than wool, and the cold slides through it like a knife through butter. Your mother is still breathing beside you, slow, steady, exhausted. She rose 3 times in the night to chase rats away from the barley basket. Your father snores from the corner, a low rumble that rattles the empty drinking bowl balanced on. His chest dot outside, the first gull cries. The sound is lonely, almost human. You close your eyes again, but the creaking grows louder, steadier, closer. A shape passes between the shutters and the moon, a silhouette that is too sleek to be a cloud, too deliberate to be driftwood. You sit up. The goat lifts her head and stares at the door. The rats stop scurrying. Somewhere across the village, a dog begins to bark in short, panicked yips. Now the creaking is joined by a wetter sound, oars entering water, lifting, dripping, drip, drip, like a heartbeat, like a drum. You stand bare feet on packed earth that feels like ice sand. Push the shutter open a crack. Mist hangs over the river like a widow's veil. Through it, you see shapes. Long, low, dark, they glide. They do not sail. At their prows hang shields painted in colors no local hand ever mixed. Blood red, sky blue, the sickly green of deep seawater. Behind each shield stands a man wrapped in wool and shadow. The moonlight glinting on axe heads bigger than your skull. You want to scream, but the cold has stolen your breath. Instead, you taste iron, and you realize you have bitten your tongue hard enough to bleed. You back away from the window. Your mother stirs. "What is it, little bird?" she murmurs, reaching for you. You open your mouth. No words come. Goat bleats once, a sound so mournful it could be a funeral chant. Outside, the first torch arcs through the darkness and lands on the thatch of the nearest cottage. The roof catches with a soft, surprised whoosh. The flames are orange, almost cheerful, like mid-sweet bonfires. But mid-sweet is 6 months away, and this fire does not warm, it devours. You watch because you cannot look away as the thatch curls, blackens, turns to ember snow that drifts down onto the vegetable patch. Now the screams start. Not the screams of warriors, but of fishermen who have never held anything sharper than gutting knives. Of mothers clutching babies, still sticky with sleep. Of old men whose only weapons are walking sticks. The screams rise, overlap, become a single note that pierces the dawn like a needle through linen. Your mother finally hears it. She sits bolt upright, eyes wide, mouth forming a perfect circle of understanding. She grabs you, grabs the baby, shakes your father awake. He blinks, confused, then hears the fire crackling, the clash of iron on iron, and his face collapses into something you have never seen: terror. There is no time for shoes. There is no time to grab the carved bone comb your grandmother gave you, or the small wooden cross that hangs above the hearth. Your mother pushes you toward the back wall, where the wattle has always been loose. You wriggle through, splinters biting into your shoulders, and you tumble into the dew-soaked rye stubble beyond. The cold bites your feet, but the ground is real, solid, still yours for now. From here, the village looks like a tapestry someone has set alight. The longships have kissed the sand. Their prows open like hungry mouths. Men pour out. They move with a purpose that is almost beautiful. A dance choreographed by someone who has done this 100 times before. One carries a spear tipped with fire. Another swings an axe whose blade is wider than your torso. They do not shout. They do not need to. Their silence is louder than any war cry. You see old Aldrich the beekeeper stagger from his doorway, honey still dripping from the comb in his hands. He lifts it as if offering a gift. The axe falls. The honeycomb spins through the air and lands in the dirt. Golden sweetness mixing with darker liquids you do not want to name. You gag, but your mother clamps a hand over your mouth. Quiet. "Little bird," she whispers, and her voice is not her own. It is the voice of someone who has already died but hasn't stopped breathing yet. Behind you, the forest waits dark, familiar, forgiving. You run. Your bare feet slap against mud that is beginning to thaw with the morning and the heat of the fires. Thorns tear at your nightshirt. Branches whip your face. You do not feel them. All you feel is the drum of your heart and the certainty that you will never again hear the gulls without remembering this morning. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell begins to toll. The Vikings have reached it. The bell clangs once, twice, then stops mid-peal. The silence that follows is heavier than any sound. You do not look back. You cannot. You run until the village is a red smear on the horizon, until the screams fade into the wind, until your lungs burn and your legs give way beneath you. When you collapse, the dew soaks through your clothes, and the earth smells of moss and smoke. Later days later, weeks later, time has no meaning. You will learn that the raiders took everything they could carry and burned what they could not. They took women whose names you sang jump rope rhymes with, men who taught you to mend nets, boys who once flicked your ear for being too slow at tag. They left behind charred beams that look like the ribs of a giant beast and a smell that never quite leaves the back of your throat. You will learn that you are one of the lucky ones. Lucky because you ran. Lucky because you lived. Lucky because every dawn after this one will be measured against the dawn you just survived. But for now, in the hush before the sun fully rises, you lie in the ferns and listen to the last ember of your childhood hiss into steam. The river keeps flowing, indifferent. The gulls keep crying, indifferent. And somewhere beyond the smoke, the longships are already turning their painted prows toward the next quiet village, the next sleeping child, the next ordinary morning that will never again be ordinary. Close your eyes now. You are safe, than you were, at least. The fire has eaten itself into ash. The screams have been swallowed by distance. All that remains is the sound of water against hull, the soft creak of oars, and the knowledge that history, like the tide, is always coming. Let it rock you gently. Let it carry you downstream toward whatever comes next. Breathe in the cold, breathe out the fear, and drift. Let us tiptoe away from the burning thatch and the first light of dawn, away from the screams that will echo for 3 generations. Let the salt wind cool the embers on your cheeks. Let the oars still dripping carry us backward beyond the moment axe met flesh to the ledger that was balanced days earlier in a smoky longhouse 400 miles north. There, by the glow of a single whale-loyal lamp, a man named Scarred, who has already lost 2 fingers to frost and 1 wife to childbirth, sits hunched over a square of birch bark. He is counting, but not in the way your father once counted sacks of barley. Scarred counts in human futures. He counts in iron, in silk, in Arab silver that glitters like starlight. He counts the price of you first. Understand the overhead. A 30-oar nair costs 40 mature pine trunks, split and shaped with axes that must themselves be bought or stolen. The sail wool spun so tight it repels sleet needs, the yearly yield of 60 ewes, pine tar, reindeer sinew for rigging. A single riveted anchor of Norwegian iron, 8 English villages, taxed in kind, will supply these. Scarred notes every item in neat runic scratches, because a raid that loses coin is a raid that never happened. Next, the crew's wages, paid not in coins, but in probability. Each man receives 1 share of whatever can be lifted, dragged, or terrified into moving under its own power. A seasoned oarsman with scars garners 1.5 shares. A berserker whose foaming fits terrify his own comrades earns 2, but must replace his own mail if he tears it in frenzy. Boys on their first voyage receive half a share and the privilege of keeping any jewelry. They can pry loose before the adults arrive. Scarred totals 43 shares, then adds 10% for accident insurance, the portion set aside for widows and cripples. He has seen too many frozen stumps to skip the math. Now, the risk assessment. The monks at Lindisfarne, for instance, are soft, but their coastline is treacherous. Sandbanks shift like sleeping whales, and the tide can strand a ship faster than a curse. Scarred adds 2 extra kegs of fresh water, and a pilot who once fished those waters cost 1 small silver arm ring. He chews the inside of his cheek, tastes iron writes it down. But the greatest column on Scard's bark is labeled human cattle. Here the numbers turn liquid. A healthy English male thrall between 16 and 30 summers fetches 40 dirhams in the Dublin market, slightly more if he speaks enough Norse to row without chains. A comely woman, unmarked by packs, might bring 60, a child half that, but easier to transport. The figures are not guesses. They are averages distilled from last year's sales, cross-checked against Frankish demand, adjusted for inflation when the caliphate's mints debase their silver. Scard pauses to spit into the fire. The spit sizzles, vanishes. He thinks of the girl who ran this morning, the one in the threadbare nightshirt. She is worth, at current market, 2 iron sickles, 1 amber bead, and half a barrel of salt fish, if she survives the march north. If she does not cry so much that her eyes swell shut and ruin her price. Consider the logistics of moving living cargo. Each adult thrall requires 2 pints of water per day and a fistful of barley meal. Children need less, but complain more. A single chain can link 6 necks any longer, and the line becomes unwieldy. Scard carries spare neck rings of forged iron, sized by the palm of a man's hand. He has learned to judge age by the teeth, temperament by the tremor in the calf muscle. He has learned, too, that despair is contagious. One sobbing mother can infect an entire coffle and collapse the market price by 10%. Thus, the gag rags, the hoods, the gentle but firm application of willow switches. Cruelty here is not sport. It is inventory management. There is also the matter of ransoms, those glittering, improbable windfalls that tempt every raider's imagination. A minor Saxon thane might promise 200 silver pennies for the return of his daughter. But Scard knows promises are lighter than the wind. He factors a 50% default rate and subtracts the cost of feeding the girl while negotiations crawl through interpreters and priests. In the end, a ransom is only profitable if the captive is plump enough to survive the wait. Starving hostages are bad for morale and worse for bookkeeping. Even the dead have value. Male shirts stripped from corpses can be patched and resold. Swords bent in battle can be reforged into horseshoes. The lead from church roofs buys 2 weeks of mead for the crew. Nothing is wasted, not even the terror. Stories of what happened to the last village that resisted, stories carried by survivors who limp to market function as advertising. The brand of Scard's crew is fear, and fear compounds interest. Next season's raid will encounter fewer locked doors, more trembling hands eager to bargain. But the ledger has another side, invisible until the numbers are totaled. There is the cost of ghosts. Scard's older brother, drowned off Skye, still sits at every council fire, silent, dripping. There is the gradual hollowing behind his own eyes each time he counts the teeth of a crying child. There is the longhouse at home where his youngest son now calls the thrall woman Mama because she is the only mother he has ever known. These are losses that never appear on birch bark, yet they accrue interest heavier than any Arab silver. Let us return to the riverbank at low tide. The longships have nosed onto the shingle. The crew forms a quiet line, passing sacks of barley, barrels of nails, coils of rope stolen from some other village's future. A boy, you, perhaps, stands ankle-deep in the shallows, wrists raw from iron eyes fixed on the horizon where morning is beginning to pale the sky. You do not see Skard, but he sees you. In his mind, you have already become a neat rune, one half share, transportable, market-ready by solstice. He notes the bluish circles beneath your eyes' fever, hunger, and deducts 3 dirhams for potential sickness. He notices the way you keep glancing toward the forest, estimating the probability of escape. He marks a small cross beside your name. Watch closely. He does not hate you. He does not love you. You are simply a line to be balanced, a debit that must eventually become credit. Behind him, the village continues to smolder. Ironically, the fire has saved him the cost of demolition. The stone church walls alone are worth carting north, even if the timbers are ash. The priest's body face down in the mud, fingers still clutching a broken cross will be searched for a gold chain, a pectoral cross, anything that glints. If nothing glints, the corpse will still serve as ballast for the return voyage. Weight against the Atlantic swells, scarred scratches, a final figure at the bottom of the bark, then folds it carefully into a pouch next to his chest. He does not smile. Vikings do not smile at ledgers. They smile at feasts. At the moment the first ale horn is raised and the skald begins to sing of heroes who never had to count teeth. But the feast is weeks away, and the sea is wide, and the numbers must add up before the songs can begin. So the ships push off, oars dipping in unison like the slow wings of ravens. You sit on a sea chest between barrels of salted herring and coils of stolen rope, wrists tethered to the bench. The village shrinks until it is only a column of smoke against the pearl-gray sky. Skard stands at the tiller, wind tugging his beard, eyes already calculating tides, winds, and the next quiet shoreline where children still sleep in threadbare blankets. Somewhere beneath your fear lies a dazed wonder. How calmly the world has reorganized itself. This morning you were a child. This afternoon you are cargo. By nightfall you will be an entry in a stranger's ledger, a line of runes that translates your heartbeat into silver. The oars keep time, the sea keeps secrets, and the economics of terror, patient as winter, sails on. Breathe slowly. The long ship has slipped beyond the surf, and the only fire left is the small clay lamp swinging from the prow. Its flame is steady, almost bored, as if cruelty itself has grown weary. Let the creak of the mast mingle with the hush in your ears. We are not here to scream tonight. We are here to audit the scream. We are here to open the ledger Skard keeps in a second pouch, one he never shows. The crew marked only with a single rune, blood eagle. First, the hush of preparation. Picture a hall after the battle, embers glowing like cat eyes, the smell of pine resin and meat smoke clinging to every beard. The victors are not shouting, they are murmuring, almost reverent. A captured Saxon, then let us call him Glefred, only because his real name has been forgotten, kneels on the flagstones. His wrists are raw, but not bleeding. Skard dislikes waste. Around his neck hangs a rope of braided horsehair, snug enough to remind him that breath is alone, not a right. The hall is warm, almost sleepy, yet every heartbeat in the room is a hammer tapping iron. They begin with words, not blades. A skald steps forward, voice low, weaving a story of how Odin hung from the world tree, how he traded his eye for wisdom, how he carved runes into his own flesh to learn the secret of pain, The skald's cadence is gentle, almost lullabies, but the words themselves are hooks. 9 nights, 9 wounds, 9 kinds of agony. Glefred listens, pupils wide, because he has already guessed this tale is prologue. Somewhere in the rafters, a raven rustles its wings. The sound is like dry parchment. Unfolding Skard produces the first tool, a small bone needle, no longer than a man's little finger. It is walrus ivory, yellowed with age, polished to satin. He turns it between thumb and forefinger, so the lamplight slides along its surface like oil. The needle's point is so fine it disappears when viewed head-on. Only from the side does it reveal its edge. Skard explains softly, almost apologetically, that the instrument must be sharp enough to part skin without tearing muscle, thin enough to trace the outline of ribs like a pen on parchment. He speaks as if he is instructing an apprentice carpenter. There is no relish in his tone. There is only the quiet satisfaction of a man who has calculated the tensile strength of human cartilage and found it wanting. The second tool is a pair of iron pincers, black and blunt-nosed, the kind used to pull nails from driftwood. Skard sets them on a folded sealskin, the metal still cold from the night air. They look almost domestic. One could imagine them plucking splinters from a child's foot. But tonight their purpose is less merciful. They will serve as lever and wedge, prying bone from bone with the same patience a sailor uses to separate knotted rope. Skard tests the hinge, listening for the faint squeal of iron on iron, then oils it with a single drop of seal fat. Precision matters. A slip here would ruin the symmetry, and symmetry is sacred. The gods, Skard believes, are accountants. Now they bring the salt, not the coarse gray kind scraped from rocks, but fine white crystals carried in a pouch stitched from the lining of a priest's cassock. Salt is expensive. This much could preserve a barrel of herring through Lent. Skard sprinkles a pinch into a wooden bowl, already half filled with warm water. The crystals dissolve with a soft hiss, like snow landing on embers. When the bowl is lifted, the steam carries the scent of the sickline sharp, indifferent. Salt will keep infection at bay long enough for the ritual to complete. Also sting like the memory of every ocean wave that ever slapped raw skin. Skard tastes a drop from his fingertip, nods once, and sets the bowl beside the pincers as if it were merely soup. They strip Glaufred to the waist. His tunic is linen once dyed blue, now faded to the color of smoke. Someone folds it carefully. It will fetch 3 silver pennies at the Dublin market. Beneath, his skin is winter pale, goose flesh already rising in the cool air. There is a scar on his left shoulder, an old sword cut, healed into a pale ridge. Skard traces it with one finger, not tenderly, but with the curiosity of a mapmaker discovering a new coastline. He murmurs that the scar will serve as a boundary marker. Everything inside it belongs to the gods. Everything outside remains Saxon territory. Gelfred shivers, but does not speak. He has been told that screams spoil the acoustics of the hall. They seat him on a low stool, back to the fire, so the heat warms his spine while the cold air kisses his chest. 2 warriors steady his arms, not roughly, merely firm, the way one steadies a ladder before climbing. Skard steps behind him, needle in hand. Skin parts with a sound, like silk tearing. Blood beads dark, almost black then, rolls down Glofred's ribs in slow, deliberate stripe. Scarred wipes each droplet away with a square of linen the size of a prayer book page. The linen is white. By the third wipe it is burgundy. Someone begins to hum low, tuneless, hypnotic. The hum travels along the rafters and settles in the smoke like a second layer of incense. Time dilates. What takes minutes feels like the slow turning of seasons. Scarred works methodically, separating skin from muscle, muscle from bone. The needle finds the groove between the fourth and fifth ribs, slides along it like a boat in a narrow fjord. When resistance is met, Scarred pauses, breathes once, then increases pressure. There is a soft pop, like the sound of an apple stem breaking. Galfred's breathing grows shallow, but he does not faint. The rope around his neck is just loose enough to let blood reach the brain, just tight enough to remind the lungs who owns them. Scarred's brow furrows not with cruelty, but with concentration. He is counting ribs the way a weaver counts threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pincers enter. They are cold, and Glafred's body reacts with a slow tremor that starts at the base of his spine and ripples outward like rings on a pond. Scarred grips the pincers with both hands, leans back slightly, and begins to pry. The sound that emerges is not a crack, not a snap, but something wetter, organic, like the tearing of roots from damp earth. Loam's shocked hand. The ribs spread like the wings of a bird, startled into flight. The wings do not flap, they simply open, revealing the glistening crimson cave beneath. Steam rises, carrying the metallic scent of iron and something deeper, older, like rusted rain. Now the salt water. Scarred dips a cloth into the bowl and squeezes gently. The water runs in slow rivulets along the exposed bone, tracing paths that look like veins drawn by a child. Glafred's body arches, a reflex as delicate as a dancer's bow, then stills. The salt stings, but the sting is cleaning, antiseptic baptism. Scarred hums again, a note lower, this time almost beneath hearing. The watchers exhale in unison, a collective sigh that smells of mead and wood smoke, and something sour, like fear turning to awe. They place the wings carefully, reverently. They draw the separated ribs outward and downward, pinning them in place with slender wooden pegs carved from yew. The effect is grotesque and oddly beautiful. The rib cage has become a glistening eagle, mid-dive, suspended in the moment before it strikes prey. The heart still beating rests between the wings, like a dark jewel. Scarred steps back, tilts his head, studies symmetry. He adjusts a peg by a hair's breadth, then nods. The ritual is complete, but the accounting is not. For now comes the weighing. Scarred produces a small bronze scale, delicate enough to measure a falcon's ration. Into one pan, he places the linen squares, now crimson and heavy, into the other. He adds silver coins, verub dirhams, Frankish deniers, a single Byzantine solidus, so thin it shines like moonlight. The scale teeters, then settles. Scarred frowns. The blood weighs more than the silver. This is expected. He adds, then another, until balance is achieved. The total is noted on the birch bark: 73 dirhams, 14 pence, and one small gold cross pried from Glafred's neck. Beneath it, Scarred writes a single word: gift, not to the gods, but to the crew, who will divide the coins according 2 shares already calculated. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. The hall begins to stir. Warriors approach, not to gawk, but to witness. They circle slowly, boots soft on the flagstones, eyes reflective. One touches the winged ribs with a fingertip, as if confirming the texture of myth. Another whispers a prayer not for Glefred, but for the symmetry of the work. Skard wipes his hands on a clean cloth, the gesture almost tender. He speaks quietly, addressing the corpse as if it were merely asleep. He thanks it for its contribution to the crew's winter stores. He promises the story will travel farther than the body ever could. Outside, the wind has shifted. Smoke from the village drifts across the water, carrying with it the scent of burning thatch and the sweeter, cloying note of rendered fat. Somewhere, a dog howls, then falls silent. Skard rolls the birch bark into a tight scroll, ties it with a strand of Galefred's own hair blonde, fine, almost invisible against the parchment tan, tucks it into the pouch marked. The tally is complete. The eagle has flown, leaving behind only numbers. Breathe slowly. The longship has slipped beyond the surf, and the only fire left is the small clay lamp swinging from the prow. Its flame is steady, almost bored, as if cruelty itself has grown weary. Let the creak of the mast mingle with the hush in your ears. We are not here to scream tonight. We are here to audit the scream. We are here to open the ledger Skard keeps in a second pouch, Hun he never shows. The crew marked only with a single rune, blood eagle. First, the hush of preparation. Picture a hall after the battle, embers glowing like cat eyes, the smell of pine resin and meat smoke clinging to every beard. The victors are not shouting. They are murmuring, almost reverent. A captured Saxon Thainletus. Call him Glefred, only because his real name has been forgotten. Kneels on the flagstones. His wrists are raw, but not bleeding. Skard dislikes. Waist, around his neck, hangs a rope of braided horsehair, snug enough to remind him that breath is alone, not a right. The hall is warm, almost sleepy, yet every heartbeat in the room is a hammer tapping iron. They begin with words, not blades. A skald steps forward, voice low, weaving a story of how Odin hung from the world tree, how he traded his eye for wisdom, how he carved runes into his own flesh to learn the secret of pain. The skald's cadence is gentle, almost lullaby-soft, but the words themselves are hooks. 9 nights, 9 wounds, 9 kinds of agony. Galfred listens, pupils wide, because he has already guessed this tale is prologue. Somewhere in the rafters, a raven rustles its wings. The sound is like dry parchment. Unfolding, Skard produces the first tool, a small bone needle, no longer than a man's little finger. It is walrus ivory, yellowed with age, polished to satin. He turns it between thumb and forefinger, so the lamplight slides along its surface like oil. The needle's point is so fine it disappears when viewed head-on, only from the side does it reveal its edge. Skard explains softly, almost apologetically, that the instrument must be sharp enough to part skin without tearing muscle, thin enough to trace the outline of ribs, like a pen on parchment. He speaks as if he is instructing an apprentice carpenter. There is no relish in his tone. There is only the quiet satisfaction of a man who has calculated the tensile strength of human cartilage and found it wanting. The second tool is a pair of iron pincers, black and blunt-nosed, the kind used to pull nails from driftwood. Skard sets them on a folded sealskin, the metal still cold from the night air. They look almost domestic. One could imagine them plucking splinters from a child's foot. But tonight their purpose is less merciful. They will serve as lever and wedge, prying bone from bone with the same patience a sailor uses to separate knotted rope. Scarred tests the hinge, listening for the faint squeal of iron on iron, then oils it with a single drop of seal fat. Precision matters. A slip here would ruin the symmetry, and symmetry is sacred. The gods, Scarred believes, are accountants. Now they bring the salt, not the coarse gray kind scraped from rocks, but fine white crystals carried in a pouch stitched from the lining of a priest's cassock. Salt is expensive. This much could preserve a barrel of herring through Lent. Scarred sprinkles a pinch into a wooden bowl, already half filled with warm water. The crystals dissolve with a soft hiss, like snow landing on embers. When the bowl is lifted, the steam carries the scent of the sea clean, sharp, indifferent. Salt will keep infection at bay long enough for the ritual to complete. It will also sting like the memory of every ocean wave that ever slapped raw skin. Scarred tastes a drop from his fingertip, nods once, and sets the bowl beside the pincers as if it were merely soup. They strip Glavrid to the waist. His tunic is linen, once dyed blue, now faded to the color of smoke. Someone folds it carefully. It will fetch 3 silver pennies at the Dublin market. Beneath, his skin is winter pale, gooseflesh already rising in the cool air. There is a scar on his left shoulder, an old sword cut, healed into a pale ridge. Scarred traces it with one finger, not tenderly, but with the curiosity of a mapmaker discovering a new coastline. He murmurs that the scar will serve as a boundary marker. Everything inside it belongs to the gods. Everything outside remains Saxon territory. Gelfred shivers, but does not speak. He has been told that screams spoil the acoustics of the hall. They seat him on a low stool, back to the fire, so the heat warms his spine, while the cold air kisses his chest. 2 warriors steady his arms, not roughly, merely firm, the way one steadies a ladder before climbing. Scarred steps behind him, needle in hand. The first incision is so gentle it might be mistaken for a lover's caress. Skin parts with a sound, like silk tearing, blood beads dark, almost black, then rolls down Glafrid's ribs in slow, deliberate stripes. Scarred wipes each droplet away with a square of linen the size of a prayer book page. The linen is white. By the 3rd wipe it is burgundy. Someone begins to hum low, tuneless, hypnotic. The hum travels along the rafters and settles in the smoke like a second layer of incense. Time dilates. What takes minutes feels like the slow turning of seasons. Scarred works methodically, separating skin from muscle, muscle from bone. The needle finds the groove between the 4th and 5th ribs, slides along it like a boat in a narrow fjord. When resistance is met, Scarred pauses, breathes once, then increases pressure. There is a soft pop, like the sound of an apple stem breaking. Galefred's breathing grows shallow, but he does not faint. The rope around his neck is just loose enough to let blood reach the brain, just tight enough to remind the lungs who owns them. Scarred's brow furrows not with cruelty, but with concentration. He is counting ribs the way a weaver counts threads. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pincers enter. They are cold, and Glafred's body reacts with a slow tremor that starts at the base of his spine and ripples outward like rings on a pond. Scarred grips the pincers with both hands, leans back slightly, and begins to pry. The sound that emerges is not a crack, not a snap, but something wetter, organic, like the tearing of roots from damp earth. Glayfred's lungs expand involuntary. Shock-tan, the ribs spread like the wings of a bird startled into flight. The wings do not flap, they simply open, revealing the glistening crimson cave beneath. Steam rises, carrying the metallic scent of iron and something deeper, older, like rusted rain. Now the salt water, scarred, dips a cloth into the bowl and squeezes gently. The water runs in slow rivulets along the exposed bone, tracing paths that look like veins drawn by a child. Glefred's body arches, a reflex as delicate as a dancer's bow, then stills. The salt stings, but the sting is clean in antiseptic baptism. Scarred hums again, a note lower this time, almost beneath hearing. The watchers exhale in unison, a collective sigh that smells of mead and wood smoke, and something sourer, like fear turning to awe. They place the wings, carefully, reverently. They draw the separated ribs outward and downward, pinning them in place with slender wooden pegs carved from yew. The effect is grotesque and oddly beautiful. The rib cage has become a glistening eagle, mid-dive, suspended in the moment before it strikes prey. The heart's still beating rests between the wings, like a dark jewel. Scarred steps back, tilts his head, studies symmetry. He adjusts a peg by a hair's breadth, then nods. The ritual is complete, but the accounting is not. For now comes the weighing. Scarred produces a small bronze scale, delicate enough to measure a falcon's ration. Into one pan, he places the linen squares, now crimson and heavy. Into the other, he adds silver coins, Arab dirhams, Frankish deniers, a single Byzantine solidus, so thin it shines like moonlight. The scale teeters, then settles. Scarred frowns. The blood weighs more than the silver. This is expected. He adds another coin, then another, until balance is achieved. The total is noted on the birch bark: 73 dirhams, 14 pence, and one small gold cross pried from Galefred's neck. Beneath it, Scarred writes a single word: gift, not to the gods, but to the crew, who will divide the coins according to shares already calculated. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. The hall begins to stir. Warriors approach, not to gawk, but to witness. They circle slowly, boots soft on the flagstones, eyes reflective. One touches the winged ribs with a fingertip, as if confirming the texture of myth. Another whispers a prayer not for Gelfred, but for the symmetry of the work. Scarred wipes his hands on a clean cloth, the gesture almost tender. He speaks quietly, addressing the corpse as if it were merely asleep. He thanks it for its contribution to the crew's winter stores. He promises the story will travel farther than the body ever could. Outside, the wind has shifted. Smoke from the village drifts across the water, carrying with it the scent of burning thatch and the sweeter, cloying note of rendered fat. Somewhere a dog howls, then falls silent. Scarred rolls the birch bark into a tight scroll, ties it with a strand of Glefred's own hair blonde, fine, almost invisible against the parchment tan, tucks it into the pouch marked. The tally is complete. The eagle has flown, leaving behind only numbers. Come below, come gently. Duck your head beneath the woolen awning and mind the goose-fat lamp it sways, but it will not bite. The sea is glass tonight, so the ship herself seems to sigh rather than creak, a living thing digesting her cargo. Cargo, yes, 38 warriors, 2 goats, 1 hawk hooded in leather. And though no one speaks it aloud, about 6 million lice, you will meet them soon. For the moment, let your bare soles find the deck planks worn smooth as pewter by generations of restless feet. They are still warm from the day's sun. Breathe once, twice. The air is thick, but not with battle. It is thick with people. First, the dimensions, because space is the quiet tyrant here. The keel is 22 paces long, the beam 6x. That sounds ample until you remember that half the length is given to cargo and ballast, and the other half must accommodate snoring men arranged like spoons in a drawer. Headroom below the deck beams is 3 handspans short of a grown man's height. Everyone moves in a perpetual crouch, backs rounded, necks angled, as though the ship herself insists on humility. You will walk bow-legged for days after disembarking, your thighs remembering the space between benches. Now the smells layered like peat in a bog, topmost pine tar, warm and medicinal, painted fresh that morning along the seams to keep the North Atlantic from seeping in. Beneath it, wet wool, sour with sweat, but not yet rancid. The sea has rinsed tunics only twice this voyage, and the salt has stiffened them into canvas. Deeper goat breath, grassy and oddly sweet, mingling with the sharp ammonia of gull droppings, left by a bird that roosted in the rigging overnight. And at the very bottom, the intimate musk of 38 men who have not seen a hot bath since the last full moon. Equal parts smoke, stale mead, and the faint metallic temps of blood dried on axe handles. Find a place to sit. The benches are oak, black with age, and polished by the slide of mail sleeves. They double as oarsmen's thwarts by day and sleeping shelves by night. Each man is allotted exactly the width of his shoulders plus 1 thumb, a measurement taken with a length of knotted string before departure. If a warrior grows broader from feasting, he must either trim his beard to save space or sleep on deck. Among the ropes, privacy is a luxury that exists only in the curve of a cloak pulled over the head. Even dreams are communal here. Listen, someone is scratching. The sound is soft, repetitive, intimate fingernails against linen, then against skin. You turn your head slowly. There is no room for sudden moves, and see a red-haired boy, perhaps 15, combing his beard with a fishbone. Each stroke dislodges tiny black specks that leap like fleas. He catches one, crushes it between thumbnails, wipes the residue on the bench without looking. Lice are not shameful. They are simply the ship's second crew. They have their own routes, from beard to braid, from cloak seam to armpit, from sleeping goat to sleeping man. The Vikings joke that the lice keep the bilge balanced. For every pound of water that seeps in, a pound of blood is drunk. No one laughs very loudly. The joke is to true food next, because the stomach is as honest as the nose. The daily ration is a lump of hardtack the size of a man's fist, baked from rye, so coarse it crunches like gravel. Each lump is scored before sailing, so it can be broken into 4 pieces, 1 for each quarter of the day. It tastes of smoke and long storage, with occasional surprises, weevils that pop between molars like tiny sacks of warm fat, protein someone jokes. Beside the tack sits a strip of wind-dried cod, chewy as bark, and a lump of butter sealed in a bladder. The butter is rancid but edible. The bladder is reused as a float when empty. Water comes from a single cask tapped twice daily. By week 4, it tastes of pine and the faint sweetness of algae, but it is wet, and that is enough. Toilets, because the body will not be denied. There is no privy. Instead, a plank projects from the stern like a diving board, cantilevered over the sea. A rope beneath it serves as handrail. Balance is learned quickly, or the Atlantic claims its due. The plank is polished smooth by countless backsides, bleached white by salt and sun. On rough nights, the ship pitches and the plank becomes a treacherous seesaw. More than one man has returned with bruises shaped like the moon. The sea receives everything: urine, feces, vomitand gives nothing back but cold spray. The Vikings call this arrangement the whale's kiss, a phrase equal parts humor and resignation. Below the benches, the bilge waits. It is ankle-deep in winter, knee-deep in storms, a slurry of seawater, tar drips, goat droppings, and the occasional spoon lost to rough seas. The smell is indescribable in any single word. It is the smell of the ship's own digestion, sour and ancient, to keep the bilge from rising. Men bail in shifts, using helmets as buckets. The rhythm scoop, toss, pause, becomes a lullaby against the slap of waves. No one complains. Bailing is warmer than sitting still, and the motion keeps the lice from settling. Sleep arrives in layers. First, the exhaustion of rowing 6 hours on, 6 hours off, until shoulders burn and palms blister. Then the gentle rocking, the lullaby of creaking pine. Finally, the communal warmth. Bodies packed so tight, the ship herself seems to breathe in slow, measured tides. Dreams mingle. One man mutters of home. Another laughs at a joke only he remembers. Somewhere, a goat bleats softly, dreaming of summer, grass. The lice travel from beard to beard, stitching the crew together in tiny, itching threads. But the sea is never entirely gentle. Storms arrive with no warning beyond the sudden, sharp smell of ozone and the way the lamp flame gutters northward. Then the ship becomes a living drum, every plank a taut skin beaten by invisible hammers. Below deck, men wedge themselves between benches and cargo, knees drawn up, arms braced. Water sloshes cold across legs. Someone curses in Norse, someone else in Saxon, the languages mixing like currents. The goats scream high, human screams until a warrior crawls forward to slit the throat of the loudest. The sound stops. The smell of blood replaces the smell of fear. Afterward, the silence is deeper than before. Disease floats here too, unseen but keenly felt. The first sign is usually a cough dry, persistent, echoing in the cramped space. Within days, it spreads from throat to throat until the entire crew hacks in unison, a rhythm cruelly synchronized with the oars. Fever follows, skin hot to the touch, eyes glassy, dreams vivid and terrifying. The Vikings have no medicine beyond willow bark chewed to paste, and the taste is bitter enough to make the cure feel like penance. Those 2-week 2-row are laid among the cargo, wrapped in cloaks that smell of tar and goat. Some recover. Others are slipped overboard at twilight, a soft splash swallowed by the vast indifference of the Atlantic. Yet, amid the grime and groaning, small mercies bloom. A kettle of fresh rainwater caught in a sudden squall. The first glimpse of a gull, meaning land is near. A sailor who produces a lump of hoarded honeycomb to be divided into 38 sticky portions. These moments are spoken of later as miracles, though they are merely the arithmetic of survival. A little sweetness balances much salt, and always the quiet counting, scarred when not sharpening axes or studying clouds, moves among the crew. With a tally stick, notching days, rations, lost fingernails, he notes the lice population steady and the goats' diminishing milk precarious. He calculates how many more days of calm wind will leave them short of water, how many more storms will risk the loss of another man. The numbers are small, but the consequences vast. A single cracked water cask could tilt the balance between homecoming and legend. Night falls again, sudden as a drawn curtain. Above deck, the stars glitter sharp as spear points, reflected in the black water, so the ship seems to float between two skies. Below, the darkness is absolute, except for the single lamp, now burning low. Shadows sway like seaweed across the benches. Men shift in their sleep, unconsciously seeking the warm pocket behind another man's knee, the shared pulse of life in the cold. The lice pause in their migrations, sated for the moment. The goat chews cud, grinding slow circles of contentment. In this moment, the ship is a cradle, rocking, rocking, rocking. Listen carefully. Beneath the snores and the gentle slap of waves, you can hear the ship herself speaking. She tells of pine forests swaying in Baltic gales, of ice floes groaning in spring, of the slow patience of trees that became masts and the quicker patience of men who became oars. She tells of every voyage she has ever made, the raids and the return, the births at sea and the deaths in harbor, the endless arithmetic of water and wind. Her voice is soft, relentless, and very, very old. If you close your eyes, you can almost believe she is singing you to sleep. But the song is not yet finished. Ahead lie more storms, more coastlines, more villages whose names will be erased by fire. Ahead lie more ledgers, more calculations, more nights when the only warmth is the press of bodies and the only light, the single lamp swaying above the bilge. The sea does not hurry, it simply is. And the ship, faithful accountant, keeps counting every drop of water, every grain of barley, every louse, every heartbeat. So rest, traveler. Let the gentle stink of tar and goat and unwashed wool wrap around you like a familiar blanket. Let the slow rise and fall of 38 sleeping warriors carry you past the edge of known waters. Come closer, but softly step over the sleeping hound and mind the low lintel. We are in a turf-roofed hall on the western edge of Hordaland, where the fjord narrows and the mountains lean in like tall, tired sentinels. The fire is banked low. Its embers glow the color of dying starlight. A single whale oil lamp hangs from a roof beam, swinging gently whenever the wind sighs down the chimney hole. On the wall hang shields, some painted, some scarred, some split and re-riveted, so many times they resemble patchwork quilts more than war gear. Among them, one shield is smaller, its grip worn smooth by a narrower hand. If you bring your ear near, you can almost hear it breathing. Tonight, we are not here to raid, nor even to row. We are here to count the spaces between stories, the margins. where names have been rubbed away. The Shield Maiden paradox is not a riddle posed by Skuldees. It is a quiet gap in the ledgers, a column scarred, never tallies. It begins with graves. Imagine the mound at Slemedal, grassed over now, buttercups blooming unpoetic yellow across its crown. In 1878, a farmer's plow struck iron. What emerged was a skeleton, judged female by the narrow pelvis and delicate jaw, yet buried with a full set of warrior's gear, mail shirt rusted to lace, axe head heavy as a newborn, arrowheads fanned like petals around the knees. The find was filed, photographed, forgotten. A century later, DNA re-examined the bones and confirmed X chromosomes in duplicate. The museum label was updated from warrior to possible female warrior. The question mark left dangling, polite but stubborn. Now picture Burka, the trading island in Lake Malaron. Grave BJ 581. Another slender pelvis, another sword, this one pattern welded, its core swirling like frozen smoke. Beside it, a gaming set with carved walrus ivory pieces, the kind used to teach tactics. The skeleton's hips had carried a child. The shoulder sockets bore the thickened ridge of sword practice, begun young. Osteologists measured muscle attachments and found symmetry unknown in women who spent lives grinding grain. Yet the grave goods also included a spindle, whirl small, domestic, almost apologetic. For decades the label read, high status male. In 2017, genomic analysis whispered otherwise. The sword, the spindle, the childbearing hips, all belonging to the same woman. The label was rewritten, but the ink still dries with hesitation, scarred. Who can weigh a dirham to the grain? Has no column for contradiction. When the crew returns with captives, the women are sorted quickly. Mothers to the kitchens, maidens to the markets, the tall ones with calloused palms to the practice yard to see if they can keep up. Scarred never asks how many swings it took to thicken those wrists. He only notes the bruises on their shins, the quickness of their eyes. A shield maiden, if she exists, is either asset or liability, never myth. Let us follow one such woman. Let us call her Thyra, though the sagas forgot her long ago through the arithmetic of her days. She was born in a fishing hamlet where the mountains fall straight into the sea. Her mother taught her to mend nets. Her father, left arm withered by a long-ago bear, taught her to swing an axe because nets would not feed 3 daughters. By 12, Thyra could split kindling with one blow. By 14, she could row the 6-oar skiff against the tide without resting. When the raiders came, they saw muscle and height, not gender. They saw profit. She was taken in the same raid where you, child, on the riverbank, were chained. But while you became an entry in Scarred's cargo list, Thyra became a gamble. The crew needed extra hands. They also needed bodies that would not sicken before market. A woman's endurance was suspect, yet her rowing stroke was clean. They assigned her the bench beside the red-haired boy with the fishbone comb. First day, her blister burst and bled into the groove of the oar handle. Second day, she wrapped the wound with a strip torn from her shift and kept pace. By the third, the boy stopped glancing sideways. He simply matched her rhythm. Scarred noted her share, 1/2, same as any boy on his first voyage. No more, no less. The ledger is stubbornly egalitarian in its cruelty. Months pass. Thyra's shoulders broaden. her palms grow horned with calluses. She learns to piss over the rail without embarrassment, to braid her hair tight so lice cannot nest, to sleep through the snores and goat bleats and the soft, wet coughs of fevered men. She learns the language of threat, how a sideways stare can silence a joke, how the weight of an axe across her knees says more than any oath. The men begin to call her skeglouse, beardless not as insult, but as grudging recognition. When they practice shield wall drills on deck, her place is in the second rank, left of the bare-fur giant who smells of sour milk. She is not given the front because her reach is shorter, but neither is she relegated to the back where the timid stand. The shield she carries is the same diameter as theirs, 36 inches of pine and iron, its rim scarred by the teeth of earlier battles. The boss at the center is dented where an English spear once kissed it. She polishes the dent each evening with a scrap of sealskin, not for vanity, but for memory. Scarred watches her, always sideways. He has seen women fight occasionally when cornered, but he has never seen one volunteer to stand in the path of arrows. He begins to calculate differently. A female warrior cannot be sold as a thrall. Her price as spectacle is unpredictable. Her price as labor fixed and low. Yet if she survives 3 raids, her value as intimidation multiplies. Stories travel faster than ships, and stories of shield maidens sow confusion in Saxon shield walls, where men hesitate to strike a woman's face. Scarred adds a new line to his private ledger, to possible multiplier, x 1.5 if living, x 0.2 if dead. He writes no name, only the initial. Names are for sagas, not for profit. There is a night when the fleet anchors in a hidden cove. The men drink until their voices blur. Thyra sits apart, sharpening a knife against a whetstone whose rhythm matches the lap of waves. A warrior named Kolbig, blonde, broken nose looms over her. He has lost 2 fingers and gained a reputation for testing newcomers. "Show me your grip," he says, voice thick with mead. Thyra stands. She is shorter by a head, lighter by 20 pounds. She shows him her grip, knife reversed, edge outward, thumb braced along the spine. Cole laughs, reaches to tousle her hair like an uncle. She flicks the knife. The tip slices the laces of his pouch so neatly the coins fall soundless into the sand. Cole's laughter stops. The circle of watchers grows quiet. Thyra bends, gathers the coins, returns them without a word. Cole nods once, and the matter is closed. Later, Scarred notes, Caraspect established, asset retained. But the paradox deepens. Thyra's monthly blood still comes, inconvenient and unstoppable. She burns moss to mask the smell, binds herself, tight rows through cramps that knot her gut like rope. The men pretend not to notice. The sea pretends not to care. Yet Scarred must account for lost days only 2, but 2 days at sea can shift profit margins. He enters a small subtraction. Tealness risk 1/30th mo. He hates the entry. It feels like betrayal, but the ledger tolerates no sentiment. Then comes the day of the shield wall in earnest. The target is a riverside monastery whose monks have grown fat on trade. The plan is textbook: beach, burn, bargain. Thyra stands in the second rank, shoulder to shoulder with the bare fur giant. When the Saxon line charges, she sees the hesitation flicker across a young monk's face. He sees her face beneath the iron helm, sees the swell of breast beneath mail, and his spear wavers. She does not hesitate. Her axe arcs low, catching him beneath the shield rim. The crunch travels up her arm like the strike of a bell. Blood spatters her cheek warm, metallic, astonishingly intimate. She feels no triumph, only the sudden, precise click of a tally being marked somewhere inside her chest. Afterward, the monks are herded into the chapel. Skard moves among them, assessing. Women are separated quickly. Nuns, cooks, a scullery maid, who looks barely 14. Thyra watches from the doorway. The maid's eyes meet hers. Something passes between them, a recognition neither wants. Skard notices. Later, he asks, Thyra, voice low, would you take her share? He means, would you claim the girl as your own thrall, your own prophet? Thyra's answer is a slow shake of the head. She does not yet know why. Skard makes no note. The ledger dislikes uncertainty. Seasons turn. The crew returns to the fjord with silver enough to buy farms and feuds. Thyra stands at the prow, hair braided, tight cheeks windburn. She has earned 2 full shares, now an honor, but also a trap. Shares are paid in land or goods, or more voyages. She chooses iron, a short sword, forged in Frankish fire. It's fuller, etched with runes she cannot read. The smith tells her the runes spell courage, but she suspects they spell property. She takes it anyway. Back in Hordaland, the hall is unchanged. Same low roof, same smoke-blackened beams, same shields on the wall. Yet, Thyra feels taller, as though the ship's cramped quarters stretched her bones. The village women eye her with wary respect. The men eye her with something more complicated. She finds her mother mending nets, hands blue with cold. They speak of weather, of goats, of nothing. Thyra does not mention the monastery, the monk's eyes. The girl who looked like her sister once might have. Her mother touches the sword hilt, flinches at its weight. Later, Skard's wife offers Thyra a spindle whorl as gift. The whorl is carved from whale tooth, delicate as moonlight. Thyra accepts it, though she has not spun thread in years. The paradox sits between them like a third guest. In the sagas written long after, by men who never smelled the bilge shield maiden's stride, like Valkyries, untouched by doubt. In Skard's ledger, they are entries hedged with risk, assets whose value rises and falls with rumor. Thyra knows the truth is simpler. She is a woman who chose not to be property, and the choosing cost her the certainty of any other role. She cannot marry no dowry, no virginity. She cannot farm no land, no patience for barley. She can only voyage, and each voyage writes a new line in someone else's book. One autumn, the fleet sets out again. Thyra stands at the rail, sword belted, shield slung. A new boy, barely 12, asks if she is afraid. She considers the question, then shows him the scar on her forearm, pale against sun-browned skin. Afraid is the price, she says. Courage is what you carry afterward. The boy nods solemnly, as if she has revealed arithmetic. Skard, within earshot, makes a quiet mark beside the letter T. Multiplier x2. He still does not write her name years later. When Skard's bones lie beneath a cairn and the birch bark ledgers have rotted into earth, a skald will sing of a shield maiden who fought like a storm and died like a whisper. The song will not mention the spindle whirl she kept in her pouch, nor the nights she counted lice instead of stars. It will not mention the girl in the monastery who looked into her eyes and saw a future neither could name. The song will claim she was myth, and myth will claim she was legend. But here, in the law-roofed hall, with the whale-loyal lamp swinging and the shields breathing against the wall, Thyra is only a woman holding contradiction in her palms, iron and wool, war and weaving, ledger and lament. She is profit and loss in equal measure, a number scarred, never quite solved. And in the quiet arithmetic of her life, the shield maiden paradox remains the loveliest, most unsettling remainder. Woman, warrior, cargo, captain of her own unlisted soul. Close the lamp now. Let the darkness settle like soot on the rafters. The story drifts unmoored until only the echo of oars remains, counting heartbeat after heartbeat across the black water. Let the longship fade behind us, its sail a pale tongue swallowed by fog. We are farther west than Skard's birch-bark columns ever dreamed, beyond Greenland's broken glaciers, beyond even the last skerry where gulls still circled the year. Is 1010, though the calendar here is kept only in notches on a whale-rib stave. The place the Greenlanders call Vinland, the land of wild grapes and taller timber than any axe at home has felled. It is late October. The grapes have withered to raisins on the vine. The timber stands skeletal, sap retreating to the roots like a frightened hare. 41 souls, 30 Norse, 9 thralls. 2 goats have decided to winter here. They believe the decision was theirs. The truth is simpler. Ice has closed the sea behind them, and arithmetic has closed every other door. First, the shelter. They choose a spit of land where a brook meets the fjord, fresh water within 50 paces of the shore. The ground is sand over clay, easier to dig than the iron-hard permafrost of home, but treacherous. Every spadeful reveals the root mass of trees that will not forgive intrusion. They fell spruce and birch, squared the trunks with adzes dull. By salt, raise walls 3 ells high, roof them with turf cut in brick-sized sod. The hall is 30 paces long, 12 wide dimensions, decided not by comfort, but by the length of the longest pine keel they dragged ashore. Inside, the air smells of crushed needles and damp earth, a green darkness that will never entirely leave their lungs. Next, the larder. They counted on the land, and the land now counts them. Seal meat hangs in strips from the rafters, black with smoke and already crystallizing at the edges. There are barrels of cod salted last summer in Greenland, carried across the gray swell, like ballast, but the salt has leached into the seams, and the brine at the bottom is pink with spoilage. They have 3 sacks of barley, 1 of rye, half a cask of butter, rancid enough to stink through pine. They have 9 goats' worth of cheese, now sweating way into the straw. They have 2 goats left alive, their ribs countable through winter coats, their bleats thin as reeds. Skard, who did not come this far, but left his arithmetic behind, like a curse would have noted the burn rate. 1 pound of fish per man per day, 1 pound of grain every 3rd day, 1 goat per fortnight shared among 41 bellies. The numbers are simple, brutal. They do not include scurvy, frostbite, or the slow gnawing of despair. The days shorten. By mid-November, the sun is a dull coin pressed against the southern hills for barely 4 hours. shadows pool like spilled ink. Twilight lasts from breakfast to supper. The hall becomes a lung. Inhale the frosty dawn, exhale smoke until eyes water. They dig a trench outside for waste, but frost seals it in days. Soon the path from hall to trench is a slick of frozen urine, pale, yellow, and treacherous. Inside, the floor is a swamp of trampled straw and goat droppings. Every breath carries the sweet, sick smell of mildewed clothing and the sharper temps of fear. Let us follow the mildew first. Wool, when it never fully dries, begins to bloom in soft green. Continents, tunics stiffen into cuirassids. Cloaks smell of mushrooms and old blood. They hang garments from roof beams, but the smoke only masks the rot. Beneath the fibers, fray like nerves. A thrall named Kali discovers a tunic eaten through at the armpit while he is still wearing it. He peels it off in strips, skin pink, beneath like new birch bark. No one laughs. Laughter costs calories. Next, the goats. They are tethered to a post near the hearth, fed on last summer's hay and the hope that spring will remember where it left them. Their milk dwindles to a trickle, then stops. One morning, the smaller goat lies stiff, eyes filmed with ice. They butcher her at one's throat cut before rigor sets in. Blood caught in a wooden bowl, still warm. The heart is given to the eldest warrior, a superstition. Eat the heart, keep the courage. The rest is boiled with barley until the grain swells and splits, a gray gruel that steams like breath. 41 portions are measured with a ladle carved from a whale vertebra. Each person receives exactly one dipperful. No one asks for more. The arithmetic is written in the hollow of every cheek, but the goat's bones are not waste. They are simmered day and night, marrow leaching into water that thickens to jelly. The smell is rich, obscene. They drink it hot, lips slick with grease, and for a few hours the belly forgets its own emptiness. When the bones are picked clean, they are cracked for the spongy interior, then ground to powder and sprinkled on snow to mark paths to the privy. Nothing is lost. Even the sinew is twisted into thread to mend fishing nets already netted with holes. Now the rumors begin, soft as snowfall. At first they are jokes gallows humor, whispered around the hearth. If we eat the second goat, we will have to milk each other. Laughter is thin, brittle, but hunger sharpens every edge. A thrall coughs blood one dawn. By nightfall, he is delirious, skin yellow as old parchment. They lay him apart, wrapped in a seal hide, but the hide is not large enough. His feet protrude, toes blue as juniper berries. Someone suggests the blood is punishment for stealing extra barley. Someone else remembers the old Greenland tale. In the first winter, the settlers ate their dead and called it mercy. No one speaks the word cannibal yet. The word waits, patient as frostbite. December arrives on legs of iron. The fjord ices over from shore to shore. They can walk to the island where seabirds nested last summer, but the birds are gone and the eggs are frozen. Stones. They try fishing through holes drilled with augers, but the cod have migrated south, following secret currents of warmth. Only fish know. Nets come up empty, except for green slime and the occasional translucent shrimp no bigger than a fingernail. They eat the shrimp raw, crunching shells like glass. Inside the hall, the fire is never allowed to die. They feed it driftwood, pine, roots, broken oars. Even the carved prow of the smaller longship an act of desperation, disguised as practicality. We will not need it until spring, and by then we may not need anything. The flames roar, casting shadows that leap like berserkers across the walls. They tell stories to keep the dark at bay. Someone recites the saga of Gretcher the Strong, but the verses taste thin, like watery broth. Someone else begins a new tale. A woman who rows alone across the whale road, her oars carved from the ribs of her dead husband. The story falters. No one knows the ending. Let us speak of the mildew again, because it grows personalities. On the north wall, a patch the shape of a raven spreads its wings. On the south, a green hand seems to beckon. They name them Raven Hunger. Old Manin speak to them at night, as if they were spirits. Old man, take the priest, not the child. The mildew does not answer, but it grows thicker, as if feeding on the whispers. Midwinter solstice. The sun rises for less time than it takes to boil a kettle. They celebrate with the last of the mead, 3 mouthfuls each, no more. The thrall with the bloody cough dies at sunset. They lay him on the snow outside, seal the door against the smell. No one suggests burial. The ground is iron. Instead, they wait. By morning, the body is stiff, skin stretched taut as drumhead. They strip it of clothes wool is woolen. Then they become very quiet. The silence is a question no one asks aloud. 3 days later, the second goat dies not from cold, but from kindness. A warrior slit her throat in the night, unable to bear her bleeding hunger. They find him weeping beside the carcass, hands sticky red. No one rebukes him. Instead, they fall upon the goat like wolves. The liver is eaten raw, still steaming. The rest is portioned, meat for the strong, marrow bones for the weak, hide for shoes already cracked. The intestines are washed, filled with blood and oats, braided into sausages that hang like obscene fruit from the rafters. The question is answered without words. January unspools in a single color. Gray, gray sky, gray ice, gray faces. They keep the fire high, but smoke fills the hall until eyes stream and lungs rasp. They develop a cough that sounds like seals barking. The sausages disappear in 9 days. After that, they chew leather belts, straps, the edges of worn-out shoes. Someone boils seal hide until it softens, then gnaws it like gum. It tastes of brine and despair. February brings a thaw, then a freeze harder than before. Ice splits trees with sounds like breaking bones. They venture onto the fjord to fish again, but the ice is too thick, the augers too dull. They return empty-handed, lips blue. That night, the youngest trawler girl of perhaps 10 whispers to Thyra, the shield maiden, who somehow survived the voyage west. I dreamed the goat came back. She said the snow tasted like barley. Thyra smooths the child's hair, feels the skull to light beneath her palm. She gives the girl her own portion of hide soup, though it means her own stomach will cramp at midnight. She does not enter this transaction in any ledger. Some arithmetic is private. The hall is a lung-breathing smoke. Outside, the moon is a thin blade hung above the fjord, sharp enough to cut hope. Inside, 41 souls have become 39. The thrall died of coughing, the priest of sorrow. They sit in circles around the fire, knees drawn up like eggs in a nest. They speak in whispers now, conserving breath as if words were food. They begin to talk of spring, the way drowning men talk of shore. They count imaginary sprouts, one for each rib of each goat, one for each kernel of barley spilled in the snow. They calculate how long a body might feed 41 mouths, then 13:9, then they do not finish the sum. Instead, they sing. The songs are lullabies without words, only vowels shaped by cold. They sing to the mildew on the walls, to the ice on the fjord, to the moon that neither listens nor cares. And then miracle or arithmetic, who can saith ice cracks, not a thaw, but a fracture, loud as thunder. A seam opens near the shore, black water glinting beneath. They rush out with nets and spears, slipping on the slick surface. They catch 3 cod, small but alive, their scales flashing like coins. They cook them whole, heads and tails and guts, in the last of the barley water. Each person receives a sliver of flesh, a spoonful of broth. It is not enough, but it is something. Hope is measured in mouthfuls. March arrives like a nursemaid, late to a deathbed. The days lengthen. The sun lingers like a guest who has forgotten his manners. They plant the last handful of barley in a square of sod near the brook, more ritual than agriculture. They build a cairn over the thrall's bones, not from piety, but from practicality. The stones will warm the soil. Above, they do not speak of the other bodies. The arithmetic has already swallowed them. When the supply ship finally arrives from Greenland late, Iceguard, crew Gontha, survivors are 37. They have eaten their second goat, their belts, and a portion of their pride. They greet the newcomers with hollow cheeks and bright eyes, offering stories instead of food. The stories are rich, of raven mildew and old man hunger, of ice that sang like bells, of a woman who gave her marrow soup to a child. The newcomers listen, wide-eyed, and later they will tell others. The tale will grow, softened by distance, until it becomes legend. The winter Vinland nearly ate its own scards. Birchbark ledger, had it sailed this far, would have ended in red. But here, in the softening light of early spring, the survivors close the accounts with something weightier than numbers. They carve a rune on the doorpost, protection, but also memory. They hang the shield maiden's dented boss beside it, and the mildew that once grew in raven shapes now blooms green as new grass. They leave the hall to the wind and the mice, carrying only what cannot be counted, stories, scars, and the stubborn arithmetic of staying alive. And as they sail eastward, the fjord ice breaking in slow, cracking applause, the land behind them begins to forget. The mildew dries to dust, the goat bones bleach white, the cairn settles into turf. Only the rune remains carved deep. It is not a number, it is a remainder, the part of the equation that refuses to be solved. Let it stand there, a quiet defiance against every ledger ever written. Let it remind the dark that some things, courage, hunger, the simple act of sharing the last spoonful, cannot be weighed in silver or sold in Dublin. Markets sleep now, traveler. The ice is melting. The barley will sprout or it will not. The sea keeps its own accounts, and the only balance it offers is the slow, eternal rocking that carries us all warrior, thrall, goat, mildewed ward, whatever spring waits beyond the horizon. Come back to the fjord one final time, but come slowly, as if you are the last drifts of snow sliding off a spruce bough. The year is 1021. The longships that once carried scards, tallies, now rot keels up on the shingle. Their dragon heads, weathered to the softness of driftwood, smiles. Scarred himself is old. How old? He no longer counts. He has outlived 2 wives, 3 kings, and the birch bark ledgers, whose runes have faded to pale scars on pale bark. His beard is the color of winter cloud, his eyes still the exact gray of a balance beam, refusing to tip. He lives now in a turf-roofed bothy, no wider than a cow stall, the hearth no larger than a bread trencher, yet he keeps one last account. It is written not on bark, nor on calfskin, but on the inside of his skull, where no salt wind can erase it. Tonight, the ink will be fire. Outside, the world is quiet. The raids have stopped not because men grew peaceful, but because the silver has grown thin. Dublin's markets overflow with cheap iron. Arab merchants sail south for ivory. Even the monks have learned to hide their chalices beneath floorboards. The great machine of Viking profit has ground to a halt, gears glinting but motionless. Scarred feels it in his joints, the way sailors feel a storm in their knees. He has spent the last decade watching former shipmates turn farmer, ferryman, or corpse. He has watched the shield maiden Thyra Grey, now scarred, still straight back, teach her grandnieces to row a 6-oar skiff without once mentioning the word raid. He has watched his own fingers forget the weight of a dirham. The accounts no longer balance. The columns collapse into one another like drunks at closing time. But numbers are stubborn things. They cling to the seams of memory, whispering even when no one is listening. Scarred wakes each dawn, reciting inventories. 47 dirhams for one healthy male thrall in 991, 23 for a lame woman in 1002, 12 for the priest's chalice, whose gold turned out to be gilded pewter. He remembers the exact pitch of a goat bleeding, when its throat was cut, the exact weight of mildewed barley that still bought a man's life, the exact smell of smoke when a village burned slow enough to harvest the nails from its beams. He remembers everything except how to stop remembering. So he begins the last fire knot for warmth, though the nights are cold, and not for light, though the days are short. He begins it for accountancy. He has decided to audit his life the way a dying chieftain audits his hoard, one by one, item by item, until nothing remains but the smoke and the silence. First, he gathers fuel. There is driftwood, of coarse gray, salt curd, twisted into shapes that look like runes if you squint. There is a broken or once painted red, its blade now scalloped by ice. There is the small birch bark scroll he kept hidden inside his tunic. For 30 years, the one that records the raid where he lost 2 fingers and gained a wife. He unrolls it carefully. The bark crackles like old bones. The runes are spider-fine. T multiplier x2 if living, x 0.2 if dead, beneath a thumbprint, smudged brown with dried blood. He lays the scroll on the hearth like a letter to the gods. Next, he fetches the coins. He has kept them in a sealskin pouch, the same pouch that once jingled with Arab silver and Frankish deniers, and a single Byzantine solidus so thin it rang like a bell. Most have been traded a whale land, a cow, a gravestone, for the wife who died birthing a daughter too small to name. What remains is pitiful. 2 clipped dirhams, 1 silver penny worn smooth, and a lump of melted gold no bigger than a barley corn. He weighs them in his palm, the way a child weighs pebbles, feeling their chill. Then he drops them, one by one, into the fire. The flames change, color first pale, then blue, then the fierce orange of a forge. The coins glow, soften, become drops of light that cling to the logs like dew before vanishing. Now comes the hard part, the living inventory. He has no thralls left to free, no goats left to slaughter, no barley left to measure. But he has memories, and memories are stubborn. He closes his eyes and begins to call the roll. First, the monk from Lindisfarne, whose voice trembled when he offered to copy every psalter if only they would spare the scriptorium. Skard's men took the books anyway, used the pages to rap. Fish, he remembers the monk's ink-stained fingers clutching air. The exact shade of purple in the illuminated capital that became grease-stained by supper. He feeds the memory to the fire. The page curls, the purple burns away. Next, the shield maiden Thiranot, the gray grandmother she is now, but the girl who once sliced a purse string with one flick of her knife. He sees her standing in the prow, hair whipping like sail rope, eyes bright as spear points. He remembers the weight of her share 1.5, because she fought better than most men on the way she refused to claim the extra half, until every wounded oarsman had been seen. 2. He feeds her younger self to the fire. Her laugh cracks like ice, then is gone. One by one, the names come. The boy who lost 3 fingers to frostbite, but kept rowing because he had promised his mother a silver brooch. The woman who traded her wedding ring for a handful of barley to quiet her crying child. The Saxon thane whose ribs were opened into an eagle, whose heart he weighed against 73 dirhams and found wanting. Each memory is a coin dropped into the flames, each spark a life spent, each wisp of smoke an account settled. But the fire is greedy. It wants more than names. It wants the spaces between. So Skard begins to burn the larger things. He carries out the broken ore, lays it across the hearth like a sacrifice. The red paint blisters, blackens, peels away in flakes that look like fish scales. He burns the sealskin pouch itself, watching it curl and shrink until it resembles nothing. So much as a child's fist closing for the last time. He burns the whale rib stave on which he once tallied days, the notches now meaningless. The bone glows, then cracks, then crumbles into ash, so fine it could be mistaken for snow. Still, the fire is not satisfied. It wants the very tools of accountancy. Skard fetches his bronze scales, the delicate ones he used to weigh silver and sorrow. He sets them on the hearth, watches the pans tilt as the metal softens, watches the beams sag until the entire contraption collapses into a puddle of molten bronze. The fire hisses as if it, too, keeps accounts. And this is the final entry. At last, only the man himself remains. Skard sits cross-legged before the flames, hands open on his knees. He has nothing left to burn but himself, and even that feels too heavy to lift. So he begins to burn time instead. He counts backwards, 30 years to the first raid, 42, the first dirham weighed, 62, the day his mother taught him to count on his fingers. He counts until the numbers lose meaning, until 47 and 23 and 12 become the same sound, until all sums resolve into 0. The fire settles. The logs collapse into embers that glow like dying stars. Outside, the wind has dropped. The world is perfectly still. as if holding its breath. Scarred leans forward, blows gently on the coals. One last spark flares, then dies. In the sudden dark, he closes his eyes and listens. Somewhere in the silence, he hears the soft, persistent scratching of a louse crossing a steeldrim, the faint clink of a Durham falling through time, the hush of oars dipping in unison. He hears the arithmetic of the universe, and it balances. When dawn comes pale, watery, indifferent, there is no fire left, no coins, no birch bark scroll, no bronze scales. There is only a small pile of ash, gray as winter cloud, and an old man sitting beside it, eyes open but seeing nothing. He is not dead, he has simply finished counting. The wind stirs the ash, scatters it across the snow. The numbers rise, drift, and settle wherever they please. Somewhere, a shield maiden rows her grandniece across a quiet fjord. Somewhere, a monk copies psalms on parchment that will outlast empires. Somewhere, a goat bleats, unaware it is immortal now. Scarred stands, joints creaking like old rigging. He turns his face to the east, where the sun is rising behind mountains he has never climbed. He does not smile. Numbers do not smile, but he nods once, as if acknowledging a debt finally paid. Then he walks away, leaving the ash to the wind and the silence to the snow. The ledger is closed. The last fire has balanced the last account. And in the hush that follows, the world begins again counting, always counting, but never quite the same. If you have stayed this long through the screams, the sums, the slow arithmetic of starvation, then come the last few steps with me, but come on tiptoe. The fires are out. The ships have rotted. The shield maiden's great-grandniece now lifts her child over a threshold made of whalebone and driftwood, and the threshold does not remember whose boots once crossed it. We are in the soft country after saga, where history grows moss and forgets its own name. Here the only sound is the faint scratch of a quill that no longer exists, writing numbers that no longer matter, yet the scratching never quite stops. Tonight we will listen to it fade. First, the smoke. For 3 full seasons after the last raid, the valleys of the North Atlantic carried a haze the color of old pewter. It rose from burned steadings, from funeral pyres, from cooking fires where seal fat sputtered and hissed like gossip. In Greenland, the wives of absent sailors scanned the horizon for sails that never came. The haze was their only letter home. In Iceland, skalds coughed between verses, tasting in every breath the ghost of someone else's roof beam. The smoke was an accounting in its self-beach plume, a column of loss, each drifting wisp, a zero that refused to be written. Then the rains came, and the smoke dissolved into peat bogs, where it would linger for 1,000 years as a faint, dark stripe in core of ice and earth. You can still see it if you know how to count rings. Meanwhile, the salt. Salt remembers everything. It remembers the sweat of the oarsman who rowed 3 days without rest, the tears of the monk whose psalter was torn page by page to wrap fish, the blood of the thane whose ribs were opened like wings. It remembers the slow drip of brine from a sealskin pouch, the sudden crystalline bloom on a cloak left too near the hearth. Salt is the ultimate historian, patient, incorruptible, willing to wait until every witness is gone before it speaks. And when it speaks in small, white squares, the preserved flesh of cod, the white crust on a thrall's cheek, where a tear dried and was never noticed. Scard's last dirham was dissolved by salt long before it reached any market. Now it circulates as part of the ocean's own economy, indistinguishable from foam and moonlight. Tell the children. They are always the quiet coda. In a longhouse outside Trondheim, a boy named Eirik grows up hearing that his grandfather was a terror to monks, though the boy has never seen a monk, only the broken arch of a cloister where swallows nest. In another house, farther south, a girl named Astrid learns to spin wool while her mother hums a tune whose words were lost with the tongue that sang them. The tune is minor, repetitive. It sounds like counting. Astrid hums it to her own children, and they to theirs, until 5 generations later, it is nothing more than a lullaby without a story, a cradle song for sleep that never quite arrives. Somewhere in the Orkneys, a widow plants kale in soil fertilized by the ashes of her husband's longship. Each leaf that unfurls is a quiet audit, one handful of ash for every raid he never returned from, one seed for every silver coin that never crossed her palm. She eats the kale in winter, tastes iron where there should be only earth, and thinks not, with anger, only arithmetic, that the soil has finally balanced its books. Let us follow the coins, since coins never die, they only change pockets. The Arab dirham that Scard melted in his final fire was once part of a necklace traded in Dublin for 2 iron cauldrons and a cloak. The cauldrons crossed the sea again, were dented by storms, were finally traded for grain during a famine year. When children's ribs showed like barrel staves, the grain fed a family long enough for one daughter to survive, grow, and marry a ferryman who used the cloak as sailcloth. The cloak rotted eventually, but a single silver thread worked into its hem was unpicked by a granddaughter, melted into a brooch shaped like a wolf. The brooch passed from bride to bride, each generation polishing it until the wolf was only a smudge, until the silver was thin enough to read through. At last it was buried with an old woman who died peacefully in her sleep, dreaming of waves. Archaeologists will find it centuries later and catalog it as Viking influence on domestic jewelry, unaware that the metal once weighed exactly 1.7 grams of terror and survival. Meanwhile, the Shield Maiden's bloodline thins but does not vanish. Thyra's great-grandniece rows a 6-oar skiff across the fjord to deliver wool to the trading post. She has never lifted an axe in anger, but her grip on the oar is the same angle, the same stubborn rhythm. She counts strokes the way her ancestor counted ribs. 1, 2, 3, balance. When she returns home, she milks goats and tells her children stories about trolls, never mentioning the longships that once slid like shadows across these same waters. The children grow up thinking trolls are real and Vikings are legend, which is exactly how history prefers it. Now the languages. Old Norse softens into Old Icelandic. The word Vikingur itself drifts from profession to pastime, no longer seaborne raider, simply summer trip. A farmer in the 13th century will describe his voyage to the trading fair at Bergen as a little Viking, and no one will imagine fire. The terror has been laundered through centuries of ordinary use. Back in Greenland, the settlement dwindles. The last cow dies. The last bishop sails south for warmer tides. Grass grows over the longhouses until only foundation stones remain, arranged like teeth in a jaw, that has forgotten how to bite. Lichen softens the edges. Snow fills the gaps. 1,000 years later, climate researchers will drill ice cores and find traces of ash from distant forests burned by distant hands. They will note the spike in atmospheric carbon, file a report, move on. The ash does not complain. Let us not forget the mildew. It has been growing all this time in the rafters of abandoned halls, in the seams of mummified cloaks, in the margins of sagas copied by monks who never knew they were transcribing shopping lists disguised as heroism. The mildew is patient, democratic. It consumes the saga of Egil Skallagrimson with the same appetite it devours a thrall's discarded shoe. When archaeologists peel back the turf roofs, they find the mildew has written its own saga in green, a palimpsest of every breath ever exhaled in fear or triumph. The story is unreadable, but it is complete. And finally, the silence. It settles last, like silt at the bottom of a fjord after the glacier has retreated. In the silence, no one asks whether the monk's psalter was worth more than the barley it wrapped. No one asks whether the shield maiden's courage balanced the monk's terror. No one asks anything at all. The silence is not empty. It is full of all the questions that have been answered by forgetting. But listen, beneath the silence, there is still a sound, the faint scratch of a quill that never was, writing numbers that no longer matter. It is the sound of Skard's ghost still counting. It counts the heartbeats between one winter and the next, the number of snowflakes that fall on a single roof beam, the exact weight of a single tear dried into salt. It counts, and every time it reaches the final sum, the sum dissolves into smoke and salt and the soft breathing of children who have never heard the word raid. And that, traveler, is the true aftermath, not the clang of axes or the glitter of silver, but the slow, patient arithmetic of the world balancing itself. Fire becomes ash, ash becomes soil. Soil feeds the barley that feeds the child who will grow up to forget the fire ever existed. The ledgers close not with a bang, but with a lullaby. The numbers drift away like gulls on a north wind, and in the quiet that follows, there is only the gentle rocking of a cradle, the soft hush of waves against a shore that has forgiven everything. Close the door now. Let the peat settle into embers. The story is over, but the counting never stops. Somewhere in the space between one heartbeat and the next, Skard's ghost is still, scratching runes onto the darkness. She does not know she learned from a shield maiden who once refused to be property. Sleep. The ledgers are closed. The world has balanced its books, and the quiet arithmetic of mercy, like the salt in every tear, will keep counting long after the last fire dies. And so, traveler, we reach the final ledger, the one with no columns, no coins, no runes at all, only the soft ash of stories settling into silence. The longships have gone back to myth, the screams to memory's farthest corner. What remains is a hush wide as winter sea and warm as summer peat, the quiet knowledge that every raid, every ration, every rib counted has already been repaid by the patient mathematics of time. Listen once more. The fire is out. The smoke has climbed back into stars. And somewhere beneath, centuries of moss and forgetting salt still keeps its perfect balance of grief and grace. The monk's psalter, the shield maiden's blade, the melted Durham, the mildewed cloak, have all dissolved into the same pale dust that feeds tomorrow's grass. Nothing was wasted. Everything was weighed. The world has closed its account with a soft sigh that sounds almost like forgiveness. You may close your eyes now. Let the cradle song linger. Let the oars rest. The only numbers left are heartbeats, and even those will quiet in their own time. Good night, and may the gentle arithmetic of sleep carry you safely across the black water until morning balances the day.